The room was adorned with lilies and roses, a fusion of white and soft pastels, creating an ethereal ambience that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. As I stood at the altar, my heart pounded in anticipation. I was in a sleek ivory dress, a carefully selected piece that was the epitome of simple elegance. Beside me, Mark looked dashing in his classic black tuxedo. I glanced at the congregation. Family and friends gathered from near and far to witness our vows, this sacred promise of forever. Among them sat Gloria, Mark's mother, dressed in an overly extravagant ensemble that seemed better suited for a royal ball than our intimate wedding. Her eyes met mine briefly, and even though she smiled, her eyes didn't. As we prepared to recite our vows, I felt Mark's grasp on my hand, surprisingly slack. I looked into his eyes and searched for the spark we once had, but instead I found a distant gaze. It seemed as though he was mentally somewhere else. I brushed off the thought. Weddings are overwhelming, I reminded myself. I, Ella, take you, Mark, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death, to love and to cherish until death do us part. I declared, my voice trembling with emotion. I, Mark, take you, Ella, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold. He recited his vows in a monotonous tone, as though he was reading from a script for the first time. I felt a twinge of disappointment but silenced thought. Perhaps he was just nervous. The priest pronounced us husband and wife, and we shared a lukewarm kiss. As we turned to face our guests, I saw Gloria rise from her seat. "May I have everyone's attention? I'd like to make a toast," she announced, grabbing a champagne flute. "I've always wanted the best for my Mark. It's a mother's duty, you know. Ella, you're a brave choice, but love is blind, as they say." She chuckled, raising her glass. "To the newlyweds." I smiled, though it felt more like a grimace. Beside me, Mark raised his glass and took a sip, almost mechanically. There was no wink, no reassuring touch, no words of love whispered in my ear. It was as if I was sharing this crucial moment of my life with a stranger. After her toast, Gloria approached us. "Oh, Ella dear." That was a cute little ceremony, but wouldn't you agree that lilacs would have been a better choice for the theme? Roses are so overdone, don't you think? Before I could respond, Mark shrugged and mumbled, "Mom has a point. Ella, but whatever, it's done now." I was stunned. It was our wedding day, a day meant to celebrate our love and unity. Yet here I was, getting unsolicited advice from my new mother-in-law while my husband stood there, endorsing her jabs. This was the first chapter of our married life. I went to bed that night, my new wedding ring feeling like a weighted promise. The giddy euphoria I should have felt was replaced by an undercurrent of dread, a sinking feeling that maybe forever was not what I had signed up for. But at that moment, I had no idea just how much that promise would unravel, nor the depths to which I would plunge before surfacing again. This was only the beginning, and I had yet to find out that the real story was far removed from the fairy tale I had imagined. Mark and I had been married for a few months, and we moved into my house shortly after our honeymoon. It was a spacious, modern home in a quiet neighborhood, one I had purchased with my earnings as a senior manager in a successful tech firm. Mark was still figuring things out career-wise, which I initially found endearing. He was a man of many talents, but focus was not one of them. Life was a blend of domestic routines and work responsibilities for me, punctuated by Gloria's intrusive visits. She'd come by, usually unannounced, with her opinions and criticisms as her constant companions. "Ella, darling, when are you planning to have children?" "A woman isn't complete without motherhood," she'd say, scrutinizing our home as if she was evaluating a property for auction. Mark, far from providing any form of support or intervention, would usually placate her with nods and agreements, effectively leaving me in the battlefield alone. "Ella's already doing a lot. Mom. She's managing her job and our home. A child is a big step, I'd hint, trying to steer the conversation towards more supportive territory and hoping Mark would back me up. Yeah, well, Ella knew what she was signing up for when she married into this family, Mark would respond, emphasizing this family as if it were a sacred institution. And then one day, Gloria arrived with not just her opinions, but also her luggage. Multiple suitcases that she piled up in our living room, filling the space with her imposing presence. I've decided it's time for me to move in. I think it's high time we become a real family, don't you think? Gloria announced, her voice tinged with a sense of finality, as if this were a decree rather than a question. I looked at Mark, my eyes pleading for him to say something, anything that would suggest he was my partner in this relationship, that we were a team. I'm pregnant, Gloria, I declared, revealing news I had hoped to share under happier circumstances. This is a crucial time for us, and having more people in the house might be stressful. Mark glanced at me, then at his mother. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something. Doubt, maybe, or perhaps even guilt. So, if Ella's pregnant mom, it's probably not the best. Gloria interrupted him. Oh, nonsense, Mark. My moving in is even better under the circumstances. Ella can use all the help she can get. Mark looked at me, his eyes searching my face for some sign of what to say. And then, as if reaching a decision, he turned to his mother and smiled. Actually, you're right, Mom. It is a good idea for you to move in. My heart sank as I heard his words. They were more than just an agreement. They were a betrayal. Here we were, standing in the home I had built with my own hard work, and I was made to feel like an outsider. Mark's decision wasn't just about him siding with his mother. It was about failing to recognize our home as a shared sanctuary, a place where decisions, especially life-altering ones, needed to be made together. Gloria gleefully began unpacking her bags, humming a tune under her breath as if she had just won some kind of lottery. Mark walked away, leaving me standing there alone, feeling anything but victorious. And in that moment, I knew this home was no longer just mine, and my life was no longer just my own. I was sharing it with people who didn't value me, and a husband who didn't stand by me. And so began my life with my unwanted houseguest, a chapter that would soon escalate into a full-blown nightmare, fueled by decisions made without me and choices that disregarded my existence. It was a new beginning, yes, but not one that promised happiness or even peace. It was a beginning that foreshadowed storms, battles, and eventually a reckoning. By the time my pregnancy reached its second trimester, Gloria had fully embedded herself into the fabric of our household. She redecorated the living room, turned the spare bedroom into her personal sanctuary, and most infuriatingly, she assumed a self-appointed role as the house's moral compass. Meanwhile, my days turned into a blur of work, household chores, and dealing with Gloria's relentless critique. I'd come home from a 12-hour workday to find her lounging on the newly reupholstered sofa, watching daytime television. Ella, the house is a mess. When was the last time you vacuumed? And goodness, what's that smell coming from the kitchen? Are you even capable of running a home? She would sneer, her tone laced with derision. Mom, Ella's pregnant and working full-time. Maybe ease up on the demands, okay? Mark would sometimes say, but his voice lacked conviction, his words carrying the weight of obligation rather than genuine support. Well, if you'd contribute more, maybe Ella wouldn't have to work so hard, I'd retort, unable to contain my frustration any longer. Mark's eyes would narrow, a flash of annoyance evident. Well, if someone wouldn't be so controlling about the household finances, maybe I'd have a chance. Such confrontations would usually end with Mark storming off to the sanctuary he now shared with his mother. I'd stand there alone, my stomach tightening around our unborn child. And then, one day, Gloria crossed an unimaginable line. I have something to tell you both, she began, looking unusually serious. I borrowed some money recently. It was necessary. I had to make an important purchase. How much, Mom? Mark asked, his tone heavy with an unspoken dread. $150,000, Gloria declared, as if announcing the purchase of a new pair of shoes. You did what? I exclaimed, my voice cracking. And for what? For some very high-end couture, my dear. A woman needs to maintain her lifestyle. I was incredulous. You expect us to pay off this debt? I can't believe you would be so irresponsible. She'll pay it off, Mark. That's what family does for each other, Gloria replied, her eyes narrowing. I can't believe you'd agree to this, Mark. I looked at him, my eyes pleading. You're going to allow your mother to force us into crippling debt? What can I do, Ella? She's my mom, and she had a reason. We'll find a way to deal with it, Mark responded, his voice tinged with resignation rather than reason. It felt like a slap in the face. Here I was, pregnant, working tirelessly and maintaining our home, only to be landed with a six-figure debt that I had no part in accruing. And the worst part, my husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner in every sense, stood there making excuses for the very person ripping our lives apart. It was this moment, the sheer audacity of Gloria's actions and Mark's unwillingness to stand up for what was right, that flicked a switch in me. I realized I was alone in this marriage, a solitary soldier in a battlefield created by the very people who were supposed to be my allies. As I walked away from them, locking myself in what used to be our bedroom, I felt the weight of the choices I had to make. This nightmare had to end, and I was the only one who could end it. But first, I needed to gather my strength because what lay ahead was a fight that would redefine my life and the lives of those who had put me in this impossible position. It was a new chapter, darker and more twisted than anything I had ever imagined. But it was also the beginning of a turning point, a first step in reclaiming the life that had been taken from me. As my belly grew, so did the tension in our home. Each day was another battle, another tightrope walk over the crater of family dysfunction. Despite my condition, Gloria had me doing most of the housework, her nagging voice a constant backdrop to my life. Ella, do you even know how to properly dust a house? And why is dinner always so late? I'd learned to bite my tongue, swallowing my retorts like jagged pills. But one evening, the volcano finally erupted. I had just returned from a grueling day at work, and my back was killing me. Tired and swollen feet dragged me into a house that no longer felt like my sanctuary. I was greeted by Gloria's haughty gaze as she sat in the living room. Ella, the trash is overflowing. Have you forgotten what basic housekeeping is? She berated me before I had a chance to set my bag down. Mom? She just got home. No, Mark, your wife is turning this house into a pigsty. It was the last straw. I could feel the baby kick, as if even this tiny life inside me was urging me to take a stand. That's enough, Gloria, I said, my voice ice cold but unwavering. You don't get to barge into my house, impose your rules, and then treat me like an indentured servant. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only when Gloria's hand came flying across my face, leaving a burning imprint on my cheek. You'll regret that, I said, touching my stinging cheek, my eyes locking onto hers. Then you deserved it, Mark chimed in, his words laced with a bitterness that cut deeper than any slap. The room spun. I looked at these two people, my husband and my mother-in-law, strangers who wore the faces of those who were supposed to love me. The enormity of my reality settled in. I was a stranger in my own life, living a surreal nightmare while burdened by a growing life within me. Turning on my heels, I retreated to my room, locking the door behind me. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone and dialed the number of a divorce attorney I had discreetly researched weeks before. I had reached my breaking point, and I wasn't going to allow myself or my unborn child to suffer any further. As I waited for the attorney to pick up, a sea of emotions washed over me. Fear, anger, but above all, a palpable sense of relief. For the first time in months, I was taking control, steering the ship of my life away from the whirlpool that had nearly consumed me. Hello, this is attorney Sarah Adams. How may I assist you today? The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. And as I began to speak, outlining the skeleton of my marital nightmare, I knew I was finally making the first real step toward reclaiming my life. There would be battles ahead, legalities to navigate, and a public airing of private grievances. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Real, tangible hope. And so, with a heart weighed down but resolute, I began the arduous journey of disentangling myself from the toxic web I had been ensnared in. Each word I spoke to the attorney was like cutting a string, severing the ties that bound me to a life of subservience and emotional abuse. As I put down the phone, setting in motion the gears of my liberation, I felt both the burden and promise of the decisions that lay ahead. It was a far cry from the life I had envisioned on my wedding day, but it was a life where I could look myself in the mirror and recognize the woman staring back at me. I knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but come what may, I was ready. For myself, for my unborn child, and for the life I knew we both deserved. The breaking point had come, and it was the wake-up call I had so desperately needed. It was time to turn the page and step into the next chapter, one where I was the author of my own destiny. The weeks following my decision to divorce Mark were a flurry of legal consultations, paperwork, and arduous confrontations. The air in the house had changed, now tinged with the palpable acrimony of pending litigation. Mark's passivity had morphed into a sneer, and Gloria, sensing her empire crumbling, had turned even more malicious. "Ella, you're making a big mistake," Mark warned one evening, a few days before our first court hearing. "You think you'll get a better life without me?" "It can't possibly be worse," I retorted, my voice drained of any affection I might have once felt for him. "A better life starts with better choices, and my first better choice is to get you and your mother out of my life." "Ungrateful. That's what you are," Gloria chimed in, her lips curled in disdain. "After all we've done for you." "All you've done is turn my life into a nightmare," I cut her off. "And now I'm waking up." The subsequent court hearings were a spectacle. Gloria and Mark had lawyered up, hoping to challenge my claims and hold on to whatever they could, but the facts were hard to ignore. Financial records of Gloria's outrageous spending, evidence of emotional abuse, and a pending police report for the assault. When the judge finally delivered the verdict, it was like a breath of fresh air that I'd been holding in for far too long. Gloria was ordered to pay me a compensation of $300,000. Mark would have to pay alimony, and they were both required to vacate my house within a month. "Do you understand what you've done?" Gloria's voice trembled with rage as we exited the courtroom. "Perfectly," I responded, looking her squarely in the eyes. "I've taken back control. And you, Mark," she turned to her son, "you've lost everything because of her." "I've lost nothing," I said, stepping in before Mark could respond. "You've lost a son because of your actions, and Mark has lost a family because of his choices. It's as simple as that." The 30-day countdown to their eviction was a tense period, but it was also my countdown to liberation. I used the time to secure a restraining order, ensuring my safety and that of my unborn child. A tight-knit circle of friends and colleagues rallied around me, helping me pick up the pieces of my shattered life. My workplace, learning of my circumstances, even offered me additional paid maternity leave to help me reset. On the final day, as I watched Mark and Gloria haul their belongings into a moving van, I felt an indescribable sense of relief wash over me. Mark looked back one last time, his eyes a mixture of regret and defiance. "Goodbye, Ella." "Goodbye, Mark," I said, closing the door behind me and locking it securely. I stepped back into my home, just mine now, and felt the baby kick again, as if sharing my newfound sense of peace. This was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, a single motherhood journey and a life vastly different from what I had once envisioned. But I knew I was strong enough to face it. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully that night, unburdened by the toxic weight of my past. I was free, and it was the most exhilarating feeling in the world. And so I turned the page, ready for whatever the next chapter would bring. fortified by the tough lessons of the past and the sweet promise of the future. And as I looked down at my growing belly, feeling the flutters of the new life within, I knew we were both going to be okay, because the most liberating truth had revealed itself to me. I was the architect of my destiny and the builder of my happiness, and from those ruins a new, stronger life would rise. Months passed like swift, ephemeral clouds. Life without Mark and Gloria was simpler, quieter, yet infinitely more fulfilling. I had given birth to a beautiful baby girl, Sarah, named after the attorney who had guided me through the labyrinth of my labyrinth of my labyrinth of my liberation. Every giggle, every coo from Sarah felt like a reward, a validation of the arduous path I had chosen. And then one day, a summons arrived. A post-divorce mediation session to revisit some financial matters. I felt my heart lurch, the bitter memories resurfacing. But this time, I would face them as a different person. The meeting room was sterile, filled with the tense air of unresolved business. Mark looked older, tired, the lines on his face deepening since we last met. Gloria was absent, perhaps a small mercy, but her influence was palpable in Mark's stony demeanor. "Ella," he greeted me, his voice tinged with something that sounded like regret. "Mark," I responded coolly, clutching my portfolio of documents. The mediator, a middle-aged man named Jim, quickly briefed us on the agenda. A few remaining joint assets, some tax matters, the house. The session progressed mechanically until Mark cleared his throat. "Ella, I've been thinking," he started hesitantly. "Is there a possibility, a chance for us to reconsider this divorce, for Sarah's sake?" The room seemed to freeze. My eyes narrowed as I assessed his demeanor, searching for sincerity and finding none. Sarah is better off in a happy single-parent home than in a dysfunctional two-parent one, I stated firmly. "Ella, people make mistakes. I've lost everything. I've paid the price," he stammered, the mask slipping, revealing a man bereft of the life he once took for granted. "You haven't lost everything, Mark. You still have a mother who supports you," I pointed out, knowing too well that Gloria was the puppeteer in this desperate bid for reconciliation. "But I've lost you and my daughter," he said, his voice breaking. "Isn't that punishment enough?" "Mark, the point of life isn't to punish or be punished. It's to learn and grow. You haven't shown that you've learned anything. Instead, you and your mother inflicted pain because you felt entitled to do so." I explained, my voice unwavering. "Is there no room for second chances?" he asked. "Second chances are earned, Mark, not given. And you've done nothing to earn one," I concluded, signing the last document Jim slid in front of me. "As both parties are in agreement, I think we can consider this matter closed," Jim announced, offering a neutral glance to both of us. Mark stood up, a defeated man, his shoulders slumping as he made his way out of the room. Before exiting, he looked back one more time, as if hoping to find a sliver of the life he once knew. "Goodbye, Ella." "Goodbye, Mark," I replied softly, acknowledging the finality of the moment. I exited the room with my head held high, my heels clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm that seemed to echo my newfound freedom. I was going home to Sarah, to a life devoid of manipulation and despair, a life that had room for joy, growth, and genuine love. The reckoning had come and gone, settling the debris of my past into the annals of lessons learned. It was the end of a chapter, yes, but more importantly, it was the beginning of everything else, of life as I chose to live it, surrounded by love that uplifted, not destroyed. And in that sense, the reckoning wasn't an end, but a threshold, a doorway into the promise of a future unburdened by the past. So I stepped out into the sunlight, a single mother, a survivor, and above all, a woman reborn. And as I drove back home, Sarah's innocent face filling my thoughts, I knew we were both headed somewhere beautiful. Because the best form of revenge wasn't just living well, it was thriving despite everything and everyone that sought to bring you down. And thrive we would.